really want to thank everyone for taking time to be here tonight for this important event, important talk and conversation. I really appreciate everyone taking the time out of your schedules to do that. I really want to thank Professor Eddie Kaufman for being here with us tonight. Really, his generosity to really take time to come and share from his experience and his wisdom with our community. It really means a lot. It's a real mitzvah. It's a real gift to the Jewish community and to Beit. And just as someone who's really in the midst of a world that has a lot of darkness, someone who is working to uncover light. It really is an honor for us to have you with us. So I'm going to pass off to his friend and colleague, Aaron Wolf, who's going to share about him a bit and introduce him.
Thanks. So thanks for coming to today's new building committee.
Well played, well played.
I can't tell you what an honor it is to be able to introduce Eddie, and the fact that he's here is an honor for all of us, and it's been an honor to have him on campus. I met Eddie in 1990, what was that?
Sorry, couldn't hear that?
Yeah.
You were a baby.
I was a baby, and what you'll notice immediately when he speaks is his presence. And I've always known him. I met him as a grad student, and when somebody of his stature is willing to work on a research group with a grad student and take the work at its value. And treat me with the same respect he was treating everybody else. If somebody's nice to a grad student, they're actually nice people. And this, I know, is says the grad student. And I've known that generosity for the years since. When I was in sabbatical at Hebrew University, where he is based, or was based, at the Truman Institute there. He travels a lot, and I've never heard an academic do this. I wanted to get some sources from him. He said, here's the keys to my office, here's my files, take what you need. And most of the academics here know that most academics are the exact opposite with their stuff. So he's always been generous with me. The work that he does is filled with generosity, filled with spirit. He moved to Israel in 1960. For a lot of that time, he was part-time at Hebrew University and part-time at the University of Maryland, going back and forth, doing these healing workshops, teaching people to do second-track diplomacy, citizen diplomacy, these powerful 2-week workshops that he's written up day by day in detail in communities of conflict around the world. And we were talking about, he considers himself a pracademic, somebody who studies it and does it and then studies it. And so we're really honored to have had him here in the community, and really grateful that he's willing to give his last night in Oregon to us here at Beit. It's a great pleasure to introduce Professor Eddie Kaufman.
One of the problems is that these wonderful words generate very high expectations. You have to deliver. Plus, what a large audience for a small community. I was praying for a minyan, and look at that. So I'm really very, very taken, very honored. But also, as I will reveal it later, there's a special reason why it was so important for me to have this opportunity to talk about a subject, perhaps one of the shortest titles I have ever thought about. 3 words: human rights, Judaism, and Israel. Normally, we academics, we want to sell our books, so we have multiple entries, so we have a title, and then a subtitle. I don't even want to tell you what was the first book I wrote. You want to know?
Sure.
Okay. The superpowers and their sphere of influence. A comparative analysis of the United States and the Soviet Union in Eastern Europe and Latin America. So anybody, sphere of influence next to the big power, there is a backyard, okay? So the book sold well because any librarian was interested in the US and the Soviet Union and Latin America and Eastern Europe and international politics.
What was the year?
It was in the middle of the Cold War. It was at the end of the Cold War, more or less. In any case, now I have opted the opposite, the shortest title ever, because I'm hoping that by the end of this conversation, you will remember the subject, because of course, you already forgot the subject of my book. You will not forget 3 words so important: human rights, Judaism, and Israel. I'm also want to express particularly my thanks to the rabbi who has been, Rabbi Benjamin, listening to me how best to prepare this particular occasion, and I appreciate that so much. And surely Aaron, that we have an age difference, but we've been colleagues in the area of conflict resolution for so many years, and I've been very much admiring what he's doing. We now starting with water, and then later moving into the spiritual element, which has a lot to do with Judaism, and now generic, the whole issue of conflict among people, among groups, among nations. So, I'm normally at Eugene. They were the first to invite me. And I am now also had the pleasure to teach here at Corvallis, at OSCO. And I'm thinking about the 2 things I taught are human rights and conflict resolution. Eventually, these are things that I brought myself to teach while I was doing that as a volunteer, as an NGO, if you want, in Israel, on human rights and peace. So I made it my discipline about 20 years ago. And I'm sort of now commuting. Normally, I commute between Jerusalem and Washington. Now commuting between Eugene and Corvallis is easier. And I realized that the conflict between the beavers and the ducks is easier too. I was thinking about trying to resolve it, but then I say I'm going back home the day after tomorrow to visit my wife. So I better deal with the real issue there. I think you will survive okay with the beavers versus the ducks. So I leave that in my memory, but to be, by the way, in Eugene and Corvallis, in Oregon in general, for people like Lisa and me, it's very rewarding. We spent 5 months, and it's been very rewarding because we have a term, I don't know if people use it a lot, called antipode. Antipode basically means if you take a needle and you put a needle in one part of the globe, check where it's going to go out. And if I put a needle in Jerusalem, where we live most of our life, and the antipode will be Eugene and Corvallis, 2 university cities, that the tranquility and the peaceful atmosphere, and everything you love from nature to everything, is very much the opposite to the world I'm going back. I'll be there on the 17th. I can give you a little bit, it's only an introduction. I promise I'll come to the subject, but just to warm up a little bit. The first week will be in Israel. I'm not going to teach. I teach there at Haifa University now, and a private university in Herzliya. You may know about it, called the Interdisciplinary Center. I only teach human rights and conflict resolution. I made it like a note that we need a lot of that in the Middle East in general, and among Israelis and Arabs in particular. So as soon as I come back, the next day, Amnesty International, which is an NGO that I've been very involved for many years, is showing a film that I was very involved about minors imprisoned in Jerusalem. I'm thinking about Arab minors imprisoned in Jerusalem. The last wave of violence, different from the first Intifada and second Intifada, has a large component of people under the age of 18. It's a reality, especially in Jerusalem, and the reaction has been very difficult. I mean, I don't feel like shocking anybody, but the the instructions now are shoot to kill. And the reaction is problematic to a situation that is problematic. And I don't even want to go cause and effect why these young people are rebelling and so on. But that's a very sad reality. So with some friends who are also former employees in the Ministry of Justice, actually high ranking, we prepared a film about what's happening with these minors once they're in prison and when they're out of prison and so on. A very serious subject. So that's the first day. Then I go back to Haifa, which is an oasis of peace for those who have been to Israel, especially Arab Jewish, but also ultra-Orthodox and secular. And then I go for a week to Bethlehem to teach. You know, I think that there have been only two Israelis Jewish that have been teaching in any Palestinian university. There is an MA on peace studies. How could I say no to an MA on peace studies? So I said yes. Maybe a little bit risky now because the situation is not calm. And normally we drive my Israeli car with Israeli plates. So I still need to look into the technicalities, but I'm committed and so on. So I am teaching and I'm very happy, but I'm also, as Arnold said, I'm very worried. My wife, Lisa, is fifth generation Jerusalemite. I am an Israeli by choice. You may detect in my accent some Latino. I was born in Argentina. And all our families in Israel, our daughter's family, 5 in total, our son's family in Haifa, daughter in Jerusalem. And we are very worried. And I feel confident enough that I can share with you my concerns openly. I mean, I filter what I feel quite often if I talk to a general public. I try to obviously speak about the context. The Middle East is 9% of the population of the world and 29% of the violence of the world, so it's totally out of proportion. Most of it has nothing to do with Israel, nothing to do with Israel. So we are not in the most tranquil, as I said, the antipode of where you are here in Oregon. So what I feel very strongly is, are we going in a way that is no way that we can jump again to the Israel? We knew when we were young, Israelis, I went there when I was 18, Lisa, as I said, was born there. And are we in a way that is going away from Judaism and human rights? And that's what I want to talk. The connection of the three words, for me, is something I hope I'll make it very, very clear. So let me start now with the why did I choose these three words? In my own way, my understanding of Judaism, there is a strong connection between human rights and Judaism. And I will try to give some examples, of course, in the presence of a rabbi. I'm a bit inhibited, but I will give some examples that I learned, by the way, from a couple of rabbis that are friendly and wonderful people. They belong to an NGO called Rabbis for Human Rights, one in Israel, one in Washington, and they have been feeding me with all this interesting stuff I want to share with you. So the connection between human rights and Judaism is clear. I hope I'll make a strong case to show the connection. And the connection of Judaism with Israel is very clear. Jewish state, and let me elaborate a little bit more. So, I don't know how you pronounce it in English, syllogism or syllogism? Syllogism. That we know from primary school. See, the first one impacts the second one, and the second one impacts the third one. There must be a connection between the third one and the first one, right? So the first word is human rights, and it's connected to Judaism, most definitely. Judaism is connected with Israel, most definitely. Is Israel connected to human rights? That's where, with a lot of doubts, and lots of concerns. How can we continue the syllogism that basically was the syllogism that brought me to Israel, to be honest? and my family is there. But I go one at a time, and I want to leave enough time for you to try to argue, contradict, help. But that's I need your comments because I want to bring them back to Israel, and I will be at the end be more explicit about what do I mean to bring this special occasion back to Israel. It's like people will ask me, what's so special about this presentation after being 45 years teaching in universities? Well, for me and for Lisa, my wife, it will be a special day. You will hear why later on. I want to keep the attention. Well, firstly, the term of human rights is pretty new since '48, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but it started in a more machoista world in the second part of the 19th century as the rights of man. Now we know it's a bit too narrow, so we call it human rights. But at that time, it had to do with the right of one man that became a symbol for the Jews, Alfred Dreyfus. The first NGO called the Association for Human Rights, for the Rights of Men, was founded in Paris by Émile Zola and other important people, that they felt that the terrible discrimination that was done to Dreyfus in the famous Dreyfus trial, etc., needed to be repaired, needed to be fought, and they created the first NGO dealing with rights as a universal, not for Christians or for Jews, as for everybody. And I was very happy that the first translation into Hebrew of this term is Zchuyot Adam. Now pay attention, we have a lot of feminists in Israel, no question about it, but Adam is still kept. We use it in the course I teach, it's called Zchuyot Adam. It's not called Zchuyot Enosh, human rights, it's called Zchuyot Adam, up till today. No more in the big world, they are more one step ahead of us perhaps, but I think it's great for the Jews that we kept it this way, although, I'm open, I'm very much into equality of gender, etc., but in this particular case, it is because it preceded the first Jew. And, Adam, when we are all Bnei Adam, people sometimes call it here a mensch, I don't know if it's only for the Yiddish-speaking people, but when you say mensch, basically it means man, Adam. But in the Bible, before Abraham comes Adam. And I think that that's something that we need to remember ourselves. Firstly, because Adam was created to the image of God, according to the Bible. B'Tselem Elohim in Hebrew. I say it because the main NGO that is now under a severe attack is called B'Tselem, the image of God. The image, without the word God, we don't like to say it too often. So the image of, and everybody understands that B'Tselem is the image of God. And I think it's great. And by the way, I wanted to say I was the founder, I was also the chair, I was a board member for many years. Perhaps it's the most, I would say, accurate NGO we have, dealing with but the Abrahamic relationship to human rights comes later than the word Adam. And I want to make it clear that when he said, B'Tselem Elohim, it is for everybody. It doesn't matter if it's a Jew or an Arab, or a Christian or a Muslim. That is the law. That is the law and the text. So let me start with that, and then this book of the Old Testament, as the Christians call it, we became the people of the book. Everything that is written there is important to a lot of millions of people. In fact, to be more accurate, it's about 2.2 billion, 200 million Christians, and 1.6 billion Muslims. They look upon us as the people of the book, first book. I just saw, perhaps you saw also the third book of Mormons. Just saw the musical. I hope they don't quote us too much. I don't want to sound too narrow-minded, but I'm very proud that Islam and Christianity at large are using our book, our people's book, to be the book. After all, we are only 40 million. Now what are we compared with these billions of people that are still looking upon us as the people of the book? So that's really creates a lot of responsibility, And we know that because in some of our holidays, we are reminded time and again about our responsibility. So the generic thing about human rights, I think it's clear. The question is now, what does it mean in practice? I mean, okay, what did the Jews do at the time with the capital punishment, killing, torture, imprisonment, socioeconomic rights? So we need to show the evidence of being called the people of the book, and so on. Well, that's where I probably will request the rabbi later on to continue talking, because I'm going to give only bullet points. Not that I know much more than that, but I just think that because of time, I will just give the bullet points where we were living. We were one step ahead of history. Let me give a few examples. The question of death penalty. We'll start with death penalty. Death penalty, by the way, is not yet the right to life is definitely one of the top rights in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. By the way, I have it in English for people who like to be reminded. I brought some copies. I also brought in Hebrew. Look how small it is in Hebrew. We have a smart language because we don't have vowels, you know. But look, 30 items of human rights in such a... I normally have a shorter version even in my wallet when I travel. So human rights, let's take a couple of 30 items, take 4 or 5 that are very important. The first one has to do with the right to life. Now, we are talking about a time where killing the enemy was a necessity because there was not enough food and people were nomads, so there were no prisons, so you had to kill. And also, you know, the people didn't in battle. In fact, it took many, many, many years till the Red Cross became into being and saying you don't have to, you're forbidden to kill your enemy. That was in the middle of the 19th century, imagine. I mean, we're talking about the Bible. Especially I talk about the Bible, but mostly some of my examples are from the rabbinical time, where we did not have any more power of the state behind us, if you put it this way. Most Jews were dispersed as minorities. So being so much for human rights was a little bit of enlightened self-interest. After all, we were not minorities. We were controlled by others. So obviously it was very important for us to say that in our book, your book, you know, our book is everybody else's book. We didn't know the Buddhists, we didn't know people that were no Jews there. So, but wherever there were Jews, we were respected, or at least accepted to be the leaders of monotheism. Okay, so capital punishment nowadays is forbidden in Europe. If you want to be a member of the European Union, it's forbidden in Latin America. It's not forbidden in this country, as you know. And therefore, at the universal level, there is no explicit prohibition of capital punishment. No explicit, I have to say. Although big parts of the world have abolished capital punishment. That's a reality. Now, we come to the time where there is a seat here waiting for you. Yeah. When the Jews were under the Greek Empire, they had some autonomy on the judiciary, and the Sanhedrin was functioning as a tribunal for Jewish matters. So how did the Sanhedrin deal with the question of capital punishment. They innovated on several things that up till today are extremely important. First of all, if to use capital punishment, the rabbis, you may not know that, argued among themselves. One said, well, if you are going to have one case of capital punishment in your court once in 7 years, that's bad. And the other rabbi says, 7 years? No, it's 70 years. 70 years. You will be a cruel court if you have one case of capital punishment. Why was so difficult to judge too? Well, firstly, he needed to have two witnesses that could come to give testimony. The first one would say, I saw it, and I told him not to do it. Now, where do you find nowadays a case where? And the other one is only saying, I saw it. But one has to prevent the person to kill. If there was nobody telling him you should not kill somebody, then you cannot get him into capital punishment. The other thing that is up till today is if there is a sentencing of somebody for killing, or there were many reasons why it was capital punishment. I don't want to claim that Jews were only talking about criminals and so on. At that time, everybody was killing everybody. So I'm only trying to make the case that Judaism was one step ahead, not a kilometer ahead, but one step ahead. So they basically what the judges said, look, you cannot do the sentencing at the same day that you're passing the verdict. You have to sleep on it. In Hebrew we have psak adin and gzar adin, two different words. First one, you say, okay, guilty, not guilty, like here. And the second one, okay, what's going to be the punishment? It could be that. As 1 in 7 years, 1 in 70 years, could be. But this very wise idea that you have to sleep on it, you have to agonize. You don't have to be influenced by the good lawyer of the previous day or whatever. I believe it's a tradition that exists now in many, many, many countries. And it comes from us. I'm very proud. Because it gives us a feeling that we have to stand up to the people of the book. You know, we are the people of the book. So let me move into on torture. I think I'm going to be very short, but the anecdote is very telling. As I said, I was very involved in Amnesty International. I was a member of by the way, first Israeli that in the middle 70s was elected to an international organization, which I think the image of Israel was obviously different than the image today. In any case, I was responsible for the Americas, from Canada down to Argentina, and I had a lot of involvement. I spent a sabbatical working as a secretary of Amnesty International in London. So when eventually there was a change of regime in Argentina to democracy in '83, the Jewish community, who at the beginning was very worried about having an Israeli Jew standing up so clearly against the dictatorship and so on, I suddenly became the hero. By the way, I got an award a year ago at Bar Ilan, from all places, of the Jewish community in Argentina for my activity for human rights. But, you know, they had a tough time. And I mean, it's a very sad story too, why 10% of the people that were disappeared or kidnapped were Jewish, when the Jews were only 1% of the population. And it's definitely an element of anti-Semitism. I just spoke about it in Eugene a couple of days ago. So what happens with the question of torture is very interesting. When I was in Buenos Aires, when '83, when the dictatorship was over, I went to the main street and I said, I'm going to buy some books, and I see a book called La Tortura, Torture. I open and I see that the author is a member of the highest Académie Française. I mean, it's very important. I see the title and so on, so oh boy, to buy a book called La Tortura in Buenos Aires after all these years of terrible things. I bought it without even thinking. The first page, when I opened on the subway, the pages were still collated. There are some books that I sort of open it with my fingers. First sentence. All the nations of the antiquity used torture, except the Jews. It was not a Jew who wrote it. It was a Catholic, French. You know what the satisfaction is being in Argentina after all these years? And see a book that is starting the first sentence. All nations of antiquity. So that's another evidence. And by the way, I asked my rabbi friends if there is any evidence of having used. If you go to France, if you go, there is a museum of the instruments of torture. You cannot imagine. Nothing was missing there, stretching you and all kinds of things. France, they illustrated France. And we, simple Jews, never used torture. Never used torture. And I can also speak about Pidyon Shvuim when it comes to prisoners and so on. And, well, I don't want to, I could make a case that there has been a sequence most of these 2,000 years since we were dispersed, that different areas, different times of history, different rabbis and so on, kept using the concepts of what we call today human rights. One of the beautiful things about Israel, which I'm very proud of, is that firstly the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, have a publishing house, which is so nice to have an army that has a publishing house. But also, there was a sequence of 3 books that was published on human rights, IDF. There's a radio station of the army. They invited people to talk, to teach for 14 weeks, like a semester, on human rights. The number one was perhaps the best judge ever of the Supreme Court of Justice, Chaim Cohen. He wrote a book called Human Rights. He gave the lecture and it became a book about human rights in the Talmud and the Mikra. So that's what there is a continuity that I'm talking about. And eventually, I wrote the 3rd book about human rights in war politics. It was the 2nd book of Ruth Gabizon about human rights in Israel. But it's a glory for my country to say that the army at that time, that's why I'm so worried. I don't think it will happen today, unfortunately. That there are 3 books, consecutive books, human rights. We started the first book, Talmud and Mikra. Then the second one, Israel, and then the third, the world. I find it very telling, at least for myself. But the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and I'll move quickly to the present because I'm still in the first term, human rights. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, this document, there were about 400 pages of 45. Eleanor Roosevelt became the president or chair of the Commission of Human Rights of the newly formed United Nations, 45. She set up a commission to prepare what is human rights. There was no, League of Nations, there was no document called human rights. So they have to prepare it. 400 pages of proposals. The guy who was trying to put this together was getting crazy, 400 pages. And besides, there's a Cold War, you have to get people to vote and agree. How do you do that? Eventually went to one Jew called René Cassin. Cassin is C-A-S-S-I-N. I wish those who are taking notes, you should Google him because he was such an extraordinary Jew. He's like the best example of universalism and particularism, which is my type of Judaism. We say in Hebrew, Imena li mili, and we say also, Ve'afta l'recha kamocha, which translated freely would be, if I'm not for
If I'm not for myself, who will be for me?
Yeah.
Love your neighbor, love your fellow human being as yourself.
Exactly. So that was René Cassin. He was the president of a very large educational Jewish school system at that time called Alliance Israélite Universelle. He was the president. He was a Frenchman. And then he was also the one who drafted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. He was the Minister of Justice of the in the government in exile in World War II. When France was liberated from the Nazis, he became like #1 human rights, Jew René Cassin. And I read his biography. We knew the biographer. He said, when I drafted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, I had in my eyes, in front of my eyes, the 10 Commandments. This is Rene Cassin. Why? Well, it was the idea that you can regulate behavior towards the others, but I changed it, that's in the book, because God was giving to Moses something and was saying, don't do that, don't do that. And I was changing it, you are free to do. And I was telling the government, don't do that. I was for freedom of expression, freedom of life, to have life, freedom of opinion, freedom of religion. I'm not telling don't, I'm telling them you have freedom. You have freedom. That is twisted it from a don't into do. But he said the don't is still government. You should not violate my freedom, you should not violate my opinion, etc., etc., etc. So it was very interesting for me to see again the idea that you can be a good Jew and you can be a good universal citizen of the world, that when we say Tikkun Olam, as you probably say very often, Tikkun Olam, it's not something that we are arrogant and we say we want to save the world, but we also want to save ourselves, because if the Jew wants to have the right to be different, and we want, we have to respect the right of everybody else to be different, right? And that's very important to remember, but when I come to Israel in a few minutes, the question of exceptionality is something that worries me a great deal. A great deal. If anything, for me, the idea that we are the chosen people is to have more responsibility than to have more liberties and freedom to do whatever we want. And that is what worries me, the exceptionality that we find now in Israel so much. Okay, I think I'm going to rest my... Okay, let me just say one more thing about the transmission of this legacy of human rights among Jews. The first, after World War II, horrible disaster, there were two UN human rights conventions, and then it stopped because of the Cold War. One was about discrimination of minorities, not to do with that. On the other one, the first convention was against genocide. There was not such a thing before. There was not such a word before. You probably know, maybe an American lawyer called Lemkin was the one, Jewish American, who invented the term genocide. Not only that he invented it, but he lobbied like crazy to get it passed by the UN, and he succeeded. And again, you know, what is the lesson of the Holocaust? Well, the lesson of the Holocaust is never again to anybody. To anybody, not to us, but not to anybody. That's the lesson, in my Judaism at least. And that was the case of Lemkin, that, you know, he took the sadness of the suffering of the Jewish people in particular, his people, our people, and he said it should never happen in Darfur, should not happen in Rwanda, should not happen anywhere. And that's the kind of Judaism that I think that in the diaspora is now kept more, I have to be honest with you, than in Israel. So I'm worried. You know, I have other examples. Amnesty International was created by a Jew called Peter Benenson and so on and so forth. I don't think in the US, where you have the ACLU and other things that have a lot to do with Jews and things like that, at the beginning at least, I don't have to make a case that there is a strong connection nowadays as well between human rights and Judaism. But it's not a new invention. I'm trying to say it comes from Adam. And our Adam is a universal Adam. Even Abraham is not only ours, he's the first monotheist, but he's also the father of Ismael, the father of the Arabs. So we have to remember that too. So that's also something to share that. Okay, let me move into the second part of the syllogism, which is Judaism and Israel. Now, at the formal level, there's no question about it. It's all over the place. It's in our Declaration of Independence, Jewish and democratic state. Jewish and democratic state. Zionism, which brought people to build again a Jewish state. Zion is Jerusalem, it's not Uganda. I mean, the idea of having Israel in Uganda failed, as you know, in 1904. Zion is the hill in Jerusalem. So our connection to the land of Israel, and I mean, even many of the Arabs who have been trying to say that everything is an invention. They don't say it anymore. I mean, only, perhaps the types like in Iran that they say there's no Holocaust, okay, they will say there's no archaeology that can show that was a Jewish state. I mean, the Arabs, I know, they don't argue about it. So we are, the legacy of the Jewish state is back, and that's Israel, and there's no question about it. When we sing Atikva, we know that. When we see the Magen David in the Israeli flag, we know that. When we see the menorah as the symbol, we know that. So that's, at the formal level, I don't think it could be any argument. The question is the content. What does it mean to be a Jewish state? At this very time, there is a big argument going on in Israel. Big argument about this. I'm not even talking about the dreams of our founding fathers. Medina Lemofet, they say, an exemplary country. Or Lagoim, the light to the nations. That was our level of expectation of chutzpah, I don't know, that we could be so much, so few people irradiating so much light to the nations, if you come to think. So that was a thing that brought me to Israel, by the way. I said, it's a new state for the Jews. I want to be part of it. I want to be part of it. It's an incredible challenge and adventure to build a stadium like in 1960, as I would say.
This is what Ben Gurion wanted, right?
That's what Ben Gurion wanted. I mean, the forefathers, the Zionist forefathers, they were not arrogant on the sense that they said, we'll teach you what to do. They said, we are going to be an example. That's the difference. It's not going telling you what to do. We are telling ourselves what to do because we have certain responsibility, people of the book, the chosen people and all that. How can we behave if not to be a light of the nation? That was maybe too high, the expectation. We have to land and say, well, there are so many nations, who are we after all? But there was this expectation. And so I don't think I have to elaborate in the short time we have why Israel is a Jewish state. I think you agree with me. Can we move into the most difficult part? If human rights was so impregnated of Judaism, and if Judaism is the cause or the core of Israel, what is the relationship of Israel with human rights? The logic is telling us one thing, and the reality was not always like today. I want to be very clear. I was fully admiring nearly everything in Israel in 1960. I only saw, how can I say, the construction of a new state with a new spirit, and even if there was a problem with the Arabs, there was a problem of the Arabs in Israel. I mean, in 1965, the military administration was abolished, and that was a real step forward because there was a problem. They could not circulate freely before that, and things were moving in the right direction. In '67, where we have this cutting of history, a watershed in between what we were really willing to live with and what we are now demanding to be part of Israel. In 1967, I was also for, I think, kavod for Israel, a new immigrant, only in Israel, 6 years. I became the chair of all the students of Israel. I mean, the Technion, Haifa, Tel Aviv University, Rehovot, everything. And Ole Hadash. I was an Ole Hadash, a new immigrant. It was not easy, by the way. I mean, my wife can tell, how some people say, wow, come on, new immigrant can be a president of all the students of Israel. But I was. And eventually I was sent, after the '67 war, immediately afterwards, I was sent to 13 Latin American countries to make the case of Israel, why we had a just war. There were two people sent. One was a diplomat to talk to governments. I was sent to talk to the student unions, the labor unions, the media. I spoke fluent Spanish, all the NGOs or whatever, just to make sure. Also, very bright idea of the Foreign Ministry to send some governments were not nice in Latin America, but you talk to the government and you talk to the anti-government. So it was a brilliant idea. Yeah, I don't remember much because in 30 days I was in 13 countries, you know, so how can I remember? I was just, the Jewish community took me from one place to another, from one university, one newspaper. The only thing I remember, I was received as a hero by the general population. I'm not talking about the Jews, that also the heart of the Jews opened up immensely in 67. I'm now talking about the left, people that today you would see, you know, enemies of Israel. No, they were really taken by a war which was an existential war. There was a war where we were going to be exterminated according to Nasser's predicament. So I felt the glory to be an Israeli. It was like, you know, there's a caricature of a phone book that there is an Israeli with a little, you know, Israeli Kobatembel, I don't know, there's like we kibbutzniks have a special hat, and he goes into the boot, and he opens his shirt, and there is a shin for Superman, with a shin. Look at that. Wonderful. I mean, I felt, you know, I was in glory. And then the last war against an Arab army was 73, Yom Kippur. Since then, we never had a war with any Arab country. We had lots of wars with armed people, mostly without uniform. They may have a uniform like Hamas for their parade. They have a uniform. Even children of 4 years old, they march with a uniform, the Hamas 4 years old kids in Gaza with a wooden rifle. They march. But in the war that we conduct now, they hide. And we, the IDF that published 3 books on human rights, we are confronted with an impossible war against civilian population that includes armed people. But that's the reality. And we, the Jews of the book, the human rights and so on, we agonize. Of course we have to defend ourselves. Whenever we have to, we have to. But we are losing our humanity because this type of war, you have to dehumanize the enemy. And when you dehumanize the enemy, that's a problem. We cannot be a good occupier. We cannot be a good occupier. And of course, it affects also the political opportunism, I would say, as anywhere else. And we are a democracy, and politicians are, as you know, politicians. I'll just talk about this particular government to be very clear. By the way, I just wanted to tell you, Netanyahu has been elected Prime Minister of Israel 4 times, matching David Ben-Gurion's record. He is the only Prime Minister in Israel's history to have been elected 3 times in a row. 3 times in a row. He is currently the 2nd longest serving Prime Minister in Israel's history after David Ben-Gurion. And upon the completion of this current term, he will become the longest serving Prime Minister in the history of Israel.
Who did?
Netanyahu.
But
He will continue till like 3 years more. He will be longer than any other Prime Minister. I'm not really want to personalize, but I just want to use this as an example. 5 Arabs and 5 Jews, we wrote a book in 1992-93, before Oslo, called Democracy, Peace, Democracy, and the Israeli-Palestinian Conflict. Another time, I wrote part of the book, you know, I co-authored it with an Arab called Shukri Abed, and we co-authored a piece, and we say, look, if Israel can remain a democracy, and the Palestinians can become a democracy, then there will be a very strong bonding, because, believe it or not, but established democracies do not fight wars with each other. You may think I'm talking about Messianic times. I'm not. If you check in history, that is the case. And by the way, we did check the records. I can tell you about some exceptions that were borderline exceptions, but 99%, I would say, not 100. You know, in social sciences, to say 99%, it's like, you're a fanatic, it's not such a thing, but that's the case. At that time, I wrote an article alone saying about Jews, democracy, and war. And Netanyahu is creating, as successfully, the fear of war. I don't want to say that the Middle East is a peaceful part of the world. I just give you the statistics of how violent it is. But he's saying everybody's after us. That has been the story of anti-Semitism in the past, now the world. Now Sweden, of course, I don't know if you are reading in the newspaper, Sweden is anti-Semite because the foreign minister asked a question about why are extrajudicial killings happening. Extrajudicial killing means killing without a trial. Anyway, no, we don't talk with Sweden, we don't talk with Brazil, by the way, now, because Israel wanted to appoint an ambassador who was the president of the Judean Samaria Council, the West Bank, and the Brazilian government said, well, if he lives in the West Bank, that's not Israel. So that was it, and so on. So I can see Netanyahu gets his way because he's saying, look, everybody's after us. The world is anti-Semite. You see Sweden, Brazil, everybody hates us. But look at the Arabs. Well, we have Hezbollah in Lebanon. We have Hamas in Gaza. We have this Palestinian Authority that are inciting to violence and these children to go and put knives and scissors to people. So, you cannot trust anybody. The only thing we can do is to defend ourselves, build another wall. I said, maybe, okay, I was for the wall, okay, wall. Then maybe we have now tunnels, so we can put cement. There will be cement, and then we have no problem with tunnels. We have no problem with wall. We are building, as you see, a wall, a floor, and then we have now the missiles that are coming, over the wall. So we have now the wonderful iron dome. So now the next thing to be in a jail would be to close the sea, and then we are okay. That's the way it's going to be Israel built. Is that the Israel we want? He's not saying a word that we made peace with Egypt in 1979. And there have been so many changes of government. One type and another type, and there's been no one soldier killed, Israeli, no one Egyptian soldier killed by Israelis. We made peace with Jordan in 1994. Not one Jordanian killed, and no one Israeli soldier killed by Jordanians. So what's happening now is that in this bringing fear to the people, we have, Sparta is nothing compared with, I forgot to mention Iran, and the nuclear, and so on. So Sparta is nothing compared with Israel as a garrison state. The only thing we need for survival is security, peace. Whereas in our book we said the opposite. If we make peace with the Palestinians, and now there is also a regional peace initiative, I could talk hours about, it's called the Arab Peace Initiative. They say you make peace with the Palestinians, and then we can, 22 Arab countries will have diplomatic relations. I say you'll be able to have falafel maybe in Kuwait, you can have a salad, the Lebanese salad in Beirut. I mean, people, it's hard to believe it's possible. 22, and you know what? It's not only 22 Arab countries. 57 Muslim countries have adhered to the Arab Peace Initiative. Malaysia, Indonesia, the largest Muslim country in the world, Indonesia. I mean, they are adhering to, it's an incredible thing. But no, the only thing is to be strong because they're going to kill us. Unfortunately, there is also in the Bible sometimes you can say, if you ashkem or gaha, if you wake up to kill the other before he kills you, that's okay. It's there too. I mean, you can choose your quotes in the Bible if you want. But the reality, I teach international relations, the reality is that with Egypt and Jordan, it's not an ideal peace because we don't make peace with the Palestinians. It's never going to be an ideal peace. But it's a good peace. We don't get killed. In fact, we've been to Egypt several times with Lisa. We've been to Jordan many times. You've been to Jordan too. And we can live in peace. We can live in peace. And most of the Palestinians, I know, I teach with the Palestinians now 21 years at the University of Maryland every summer. We also live together, Luke. Do I look okay? And we also bring our grandchildren when they are bar mitzvah age to spend summer with us, so they will have a Palestinian uncle living in the same apartment and realize that we can, we can be living together. But what's happening now with this mixture of religious zealots, that they do believe in the coming of the Messiah only when they will rebuild the temple of Jerusalem on top, which is erasing the two mosques on the top of Temple Mount Haram al-Sharif. The youth, the hilltop youth that have been sort of fermenting a Jewish underground of young people. And we have a government that is trying to say, okay, we try to stop that and stop what they call the left. I don't know, by the way, from the left if they ever killed anybody, like Rabin, or like Emil Greenswag, the leader of Peace Now. They are law-abiding citizens. By the way, I'm a centrist liberal, but I just want to say, what left? What are they doing? They are law-abiding citizens. They ask for permission to demonstrate. They don't kill anybody. And then the other messianic side, they don't believe in a democracy. They do not believe in a democracy. They say, in the last week in the Knesset, a bill that was brought by, let's call it the left this time, saying Israel is a democracy. I can give you, the Israeli Knesset rejected a bill that called for equality for all citizens. We have it in the Declaration of Independence. It's not a law, it's a preamble. It's Medinat Kol Ezrachia in Hebrew, the state of all its citizens. But now to put it on the law, no way. In fact, the law that is going to pass is the law that says we are not longer Jewish and democratic. We are Jewish. And then on the second order, democratic. The law, or fundamental law of Israel, is saying Hebrew and Arabic are the official languages of the state of Israel. Not English, but Hebrew and Arabic. Now they're going to change that, only Hebrew. Why do we need that? There are 23% of the population in Israel is Arab. Let alone, if we live in peace. You told me you went to Korea, was it, that you couldn't read the signs? We hope there will be a lot of tourism coming to Jerusalem from the Arab world. I mean, we want to leave the Arabic. What does it cost us to put in the signs? I have lots of examples. I mean, the last thing I just want to say about how Israel is changing and is getting far away from human rights, all these things I'm telling you, at a very rapid speed. Very rapid, especially the last 2 years. In the previous book, 92, I wrote that discrimination, societal discrimination in Israel was bigger than official discrimination. I meant to say government are more moderate than public opinion when it comes to the other. Now I'm changing my mind. The government is more extreme than the public opinion. And that's so frightening. Because when I generalized 20 years ago and I say the government is more moderate in discrimination than the public, I had in mind the independent judiciary, which has been an example in so many ways, including, by the way, an Arab member of the 9 judges in the Supreme Court of Justice, who has been there. Now they complain because he did not stand up to sing the Atikva in a ceremony. And he said, I stood up, look, I had to defend himself, but I cannot sing Atikva. You know the word of Atikva? Well, I cannot sing Atikva, but he stood up. What else do you want? What else do you want? We are in a trip into a messianic dream that only Jews and observant Jews can live in this country as equals. And the rest, sorry. Ethnic cleansing, maybe. Buy them out, give them money to sell property, and with this money to emigrate to Australia. There's also some American Jewish money doing that in Jerusalem, like buying property, and the person who is, by the way, they are forbidden to sell property to the Jews. They could be punished by death, even by the Jordanian legislation. So there's always intermediaries and so on, and so on. But that's happening. So as people don't like the term Judenrein, a country with no Jews. Now we are into a country without nobody else but Jews. And it's going this way. I mean, I'm not a prophet. I'm just only a political scientist. We see the signs. I will just finish by telling you the following. Am I okay on time? I'm looking a little bit more than I anticipated. Okay, just finish with the last. What brought Jewish independence into breakdown was intra-Jewish fighting in history. There were, when Aris Shavit was talking here, I believe, at the university for, who went to the lecture of Aris Shavit? Raise your hands. Only you? Only you? Oh, God. Because,
the Bedouin guy?
no. It doesn't matter. He's a very important journalist and he came to Corvallis.
He didn't come.
No,
He
he
didn't
didn't
come.
come.
No, maybe.
No, he got, it
Gee.
was just a weather thing, he didn't make it.
Oh, boy, so sorry. In his lecture, he said that Jewish independence, a united independence, was twice in history and no more than 70 years. That's what he said. In the long Jewish history of so many years, only twice. And now we are getting close to 70 years. And I worry. I mean, not that the past has to predict the future, but I worry. Because of the intra-Jewish fighting that is now happening. That was the reason why, am I right, that it was not, it was not Hillel, who destroyed, I mean, there was mostly the inner fighting with the others, or the zealots when it comes with Bar Kaufman and so on. We ourselves have lost the ability to be united and independent. Why do I say that? And that's the last thing. Is because the NGOs who are for human rights, the ACLU of Israel called ACRI, Association for Civil Rights in Israel. Now, yesterday, there was a first reading of a legislation that when they come to the Knesset, they have to have a badge saying basically foreign agent. Why? Because indeed, some European governments and the USAID and others are giving money, as they do to other NGOs everywhere in the world, because they care for human rights, democracy, and peace. And in general, if it's in China, it will be not necessarily the left, it may be a right wing, because, or in Cuba, they probably will call it, it's not necessarily left or right, it's just democracy, peace, human rights. For me, these are universal values. But in the context of Israel, because the critique I'm doing is basically the problem of the occupation, as you see, is getting us really out of the legacy of we inherited from our forefathers and our Bible and everything else. There are now this organization called Im Tirtzu, which is kind of going after people. Maybe some of you know the New Israel Fund. Maybe some are familiar. Well, the New Israel Fund has been categorized as an enemy of Israel. I mean, the number one chairperson and former Knesset member, Romy Khatan, appeared there in a poster. Keren, in Hebrew, means also horn. So, woman, they put a big nose and a horn, and that was the New Israel Fund. That's an Israeli organization called Im Tirtzu. And now, they are now putting a list of, they call it, they use the word traitors, as Yigal Amir, when he killed Rabin, he was influenced by two rabbis who say basically that when there is a traitor, there is something called din rodef, I don't know how to translate it, and these traitors can be killed because they're traitors. What if I tell you that now there is a list of 7,000 traitors that they prepare with another group, apparently American Jewish, I should say. Now I think the group is called Mesada in the internet because the previous group were Kahana, Rabbi Kahana people, and they were intercepted and they were taken out of the internet. So now they are hidden. But if you Google SHIT, you can make yourself the composition sheet, yes. It means self-hating Israeli traitors. And, I had the honor to be there when there were only 2,000. No, there are 7,000. I had the honor because I served in the army. I went to artillery. I was in 2 wars. I voted once in Lebanon. I voted once, not in the Golan Heights, in Syria, 30 kilometers of Damascus. My wife lost her father in the War of Independence. All my children are in Israel. The oldest of our grandchildren has now ended service in the most commando secret unit of the army. But I am, for this divisive situation in Israel, one of the 7,000 in the ship list. It's all happening. So the question is, why do I tell you that? There are 2 reasons. One, egoistic, if you want, and the other one, altruistic. The egoistic one, and that's why I consulted Rabbi Benjamin first, and then I also told Aaron, is dividing us not only political parties, not macro in Israel, but also families. We had this wonderful feeling in our family. 2 children, each one married happily with 3 kids. We're talking about 10. This is our, if you want, nuclear family plus. We were more or less living in harmony when it comes to looking at Israel, what is Israel. They all gave, not only went to the army, the oldest one, but they gave a year of voluntary, on top of 3 years in the army, 1 year to do work in nature. That's wonderful youth. And then we had 2 times a big argument. I don't want to tell the first one, but I told the last one, we triggered me talking to Aaron and especially to Rabbi Benjamin, which is to say, it happened, by the way, about a month ago when you were in the retreats, I think it was a month ago more or less, that the Minister of Defense and the Minister of Education told an NGO called Breaking the Silence that they will not be allowed anymore to go to schools to talk, and they will not be allowed to talk to soldiers no more. Why? Because they told any soldier who has evidence about something that is against humanitarian law, which is the law of war, or human rights, you should feel free to provide testimony, and they will record the testimony. The name will be withheld. If a person wants to say the name, it's okay, but they will be kept in.
Never, they don't publish.
They don't publish
names,
never.
and they are all army officers and soldiers
Right.
and so on.
So here's the story. I'm finishing. I see the time. Here's the story. We were perplexed that these people that are officers, giving their life and so on, that they want to keep the purity of weapons as it should be, they are not punished for doing that. So Lisa called my daughter and said, maybe we want to donate 180 shekels, 10 times high, to this organization so that they will still continue to do the good work. I think it, by the way.
More than that, there was a news, I think, they wanted to publish an ad against the law forbidding this organization, not they themselves.
That's right. It was to publish
But it
an
was to publish calling the Knesset not to pass
That's
this
it.
law.
So now I'm discussing the secrets of my family. Our daughter, that is, obviously I'm very objective, very calm. She said, why do you have to give money? Don't you see you are, these people are okay to criticize, but they're now doing it also overseas. They go to the US and they speak about it, like assuming that, with globalization, any secret that is published in Jerusalem in an Israeli paper is not going to come to the New York Times and so on. But she has this sense of patriotism that your dirty linen, you wash it at home and not outside. And it became a very difficult conversation with Lisa.
Well, that was the time that her son, her eldest, was in this unit. And the whole thing became very emotional because politically, 99.9% of the time, she shares our views. And she brought up her kids to have these values and so on, the way we brought up our kids also. Our son was in combat units and our, but at that point, she got so emotional
Yeah.
about soldiers and officers talking abroad about what is happening. And I told her, Corinne, what are you talking about? Whatever happens here is out immediately, like whatever happens in other places.
Anyway,
That's not the point. Anyhow,
No,
it
it became
It was
an
very
issue,
emotional.
and I say to her, you know what? I may be doing the same. I may be doing the same. Maybe I'm a bit different because I put it in a context. I said the Middle East is horrible, the situation is bad. They often start, and then we have to react, and yet I want to be compared with a Christian, Jewish Christian civilization, let's call it. I mean, with the people who say we are people of the book, I want to look west and not say I'm better than Syria, or I'm not into comparing myself with Syria. I mean, we, the chosen people, etc., etc. So I told her more or less that, and I said, but you know what? I have an opportunity. I'm talking to a congregation. I want to videotape that. We want to videotape it. And there is no great Talmud Bikuach, how do you say in English, in Israel?
Talmudic dispute.
When we argue, not in the most Oxfordian way of to say it mildly. So I want to have a testimony of what I'm talking to you, and maybe if you can react, I would like them to hear your reactions. Am I extremist? I'm not like a good Zionist or a good Jew. Am I doing anything wrong? I want to get your feedback because I want them to understand what is not only the world, but half of the Jewish world is in the diaspora. And the more time passes, and the situation is like this, the difference between Israeli and Israelitas, we call it in Latin America, is narrowing. You had the experience with Netanyahu coming to Congress against the wish of Obama. And then you need to take sides. Are you with this one or this one? Question of double loyalty is coming up. In Argentina, the Hezbollah and Iran, they blow up the Israeli embassy. A year afterwards, they blew up the Jewish Community Center, Amia. So it's not that we are isolated. Whatever Israel is doing has an impact. And for better or for worse, whatever Jews do in the diaspora have an impact in Israel. I'm not necessarily saying always for the better. I wish it would be for the better, because you are the only true mirror. If I am the Snow White's stepmother, and I ask myself, am I beautiful? I mean, probably we are the only one that I will trust your judgment. I mean, that's the reality. But if you will tell me every time I'm beautiful, I don't gain anything by getting self-convinced that we are an exemplary country. We are a startup nation, that's great, I'm so proud. But when it comes to this question of treating minorities or treating issues with human rights, we have a big problem. So we are in the same boat. That's the last word I wanted to say, because the question of social responsibility, by the way, I have prepared a little addition about Hillel saying that what is in the Torah, when they asked him, and he says, well, on one feet, don't do to the other what you don't want it to be done to yourself. And I have many other quotes that are beautiful quotes about social responsibility. Now, there is a social responsibility for an Israeli Jew, there is a social responsibility for a diaspora Jew, but there is a responsibility. And the question that you need to continue to debate, in my absence, when I go back to Israel, is what is the responsibility you have? You don't live there, you don't vote there. So, sorry, I'm for it, by the way, that if you live in the diaspora, you don't have the right to vote. Well, people there have the right to vote. Okay. But having said that, you still have a connection, for better or for worse, that will affect your life as a Jew, and you need to think about it. And you need to, when you talk to, you don't have to talk to the President of Israel, by the way, a darling President of Israel, and full of appreciation. The way he's talking and thinking, it's a fresh air coming from the same party. And by the way, we know a lot of Jabotinsky, people that are so upset with the reality and so on. But that's what I'm saying is, when you talk to fellow people, especially when you go to Israel, they need to know what is the true face of Israel. Not that everybody, the world has changed, yes. The Arabs have changed, yes. But Israel has changed. Israel of '67 is very different than Israel of 2016 when I go to universities and I talk and so on. So I finish with this thought. I see the camera. I hope the camera was working. I don't even know where the camera is. Oh, okay, even better. I don't speak to the camera. But I mean, they will be listening to this conclusion of mine, saying, yes, I've done it with great pleasure to share with you, but I've done it also for my family, that I want them to know whether the grandfather or father is collecting mitzvot. As I always thought, the mitzvot of behavior are more important than the mitzvot of the ritual. I think that's another beauty in Judaism. And in Yom Kippur, that's not enough to ask him to forgive us, but we have to persevere and ask anybody that you thought you have done some damage to ask for forgiveness. So I'm also now saying that's what I do. In a Jewish community, that's what I do and will continue to do. And let's see what they think. But let me first see what you think about what I say.
Thanks, Eddie. So, just mentioning the camera, first of all, thanks to Joe Kemper. This is not his field, he's a water guy, just surprisingly. So let's thank him for taking. What we've asked is that he'll keep the camera on Eddie, so if we do end up putting it online, you've seen Judy Klopper would like to use this, or to see this talk, so we'll talk about it. We'll send out notice to everybody, but make sure that none of your faces are there, so just be your voice if you're interested. And Eddie's willing to entertain questions, comments. Floor is yours.
It looks like Israel has turned out to have lost the Six-Day War, because Zionists claim the whole point of creating Israel was not as a Jewish state, but as a state for Jews, where Jews of all sorts could live together. And at the beginning, most of the fundamentalists, ultra-Orthodox in general, rejected the whole idea of Medinat Yisrael, the state of Israel, and they stayed away. And Israel became a democracy which was good for all Jews of all sorts, and for the Arabs to a certain extent. And then after 1967, after the war, most of the Orthodox took that as a sign from God that the state of Israel is acceptable. And therefore, they decided to come in and turn it into a Jewish state. And that's what they're doing right now. Most of the settlers came from Brooklyn. And this is what's tearing apart Israel. This is what's causing the problem that you said, because as you said, fundamentalism of any sort is inherently incompatible with democracy, because if you know the will of God, why would you allow any other opinion to even be expressed, much less considered or adopted? And so it looks like Israel will have ended up losing the Six-Day War.
You know, your words have been very powerful, and I wish they will listen to that, because it's exactly what I feel. I can paraphrase it a little bit and say two things. Firstly, we had a former chief of Israeli intelligence who was also a professor at Hebrew U later, Yoshaphat Kavi, who wrote a book about fateful decisions. And he said, look what happened, speaking about the 67 war. Before 67, Zionists were minimalists, and they would go for any opportunity to be legitimized and make peace, including accepting the partition of 1947 that gave only, 52%, 55% of the land to Israel, and Jerusalem to be an international city. And that has been the case in 1967. Of course, Jerusalem was going to be already capital of Israel, at least a part of West Jerusalem. But if you would have had the public opinion in Israel for a month before the war of 67, people would say, if the Arabs will make peace with us, Ada Shamayim, I mean, God bless them, we will go for it. What could be better than to make peace with the Arabs? The territorial ambition and the idea of Eretz Israel Hashlema, the greater Israel, a rabbi Cook, he was one of the guys who say, the rabbis who say, now the prophecy is that we cannot give away any part of the land of Israel, the biblical land, because this is the command of God. They gave us Eretz Israel. It's like God told exactly where the borders have to be. And then, not a concept, which was so beautiful, but just a boundary. And then since then, we have this situation. And Al-Kabi said, look, the Arabs were maximalists. And they lost one after the other. Comes the 6-day war. We won the war. And it took time. But the Arabs became minimalists. They said, give us 28% of historic Palestine. This is the West Bank. And then we'll make peace. 28%, not 45%. And we, that were minimalists, we were able to separate at the beginning the grand design, or let's say God's will, if I would be a zealot, from reality. And the Arabs were those who were not able to separate Dar el-Islam, because all this part was the Caliphate, and all this part was the land. So Lebanon could not be Christian, Israel could not be Jewish. And now the Arab League, 22 countries, the Muslim world, it's 57 years, telling us, you know what, they even talk about Syria now. Just Palestine, I'm telling you from first hand. So, and then, but now it's too late. We lost the war. It's exactly, I don't think it's too late. But we are at the borderline where things will be irreversible. And you know, if not by ballots, by having one state, then we are a democracy, there will be a majority demography. It will be by bullets. But one way or another, we want to keep Israel Jewish with all this extra population that will have no equal rights. So I really thank you for mentioning that, the difference between a state for the Jews and a Jewish zealot, Orthodox, or even ultra-Orthodox state. Yes, yes.
One of the interesting themes that your talk really highlighted was the evolution of the word exceptionalism. And where the original conception was that we're exceptional, hence we should aspire to high ideals. But the way you used it later, or at one point in the talk, exceptionalism means we as a country take, you know, legitimize, we are sort of de facto legitimized for anything we do because, and it's that evolution that represents sort of a fundamental change in the character as you've described. And I'm really interested, why did the character change in that way?
It's a topic to be discussed at the community for many hours. I think it will be incredibly important, but I'll give you what I can do is a very short answer. It's for me also a new concept because I came across the concept in the international relations literature only now, in the academic literature. And a student of mine, now a big scholar, Emmanuel Adler at the University of Toronto and Hebrew University, now on the University of Toronto, my teaching assistant, my research assistant, he wrote a book called Israel's Exceptionalism. But when I thought about it before now being part of the lingo of academia, I attributed to the fact that because of the Jewish suffering, especially the Holocaust, people have to accept from us a compensation for all our suffering, surely for what people have done 200 years ago in the US, which is to take over a territory of another nation. Of course, we were there first, 2,000 years, but there were Arabs there, and now we have a Jewish state. And I sort of could live with that. And I say, look, all countries were born at sin. If you come to think about this country, and most countries in Spain, so that was at birth, a sin. I don't want to perpetuate the sin. I don't think it's something Jewish, you know, from my perspective. So my exceptionalism at the beginning was to say, what is the chosen people? Why is, you know, we call ourselves Am Nivchar. It's not something that we say, by the way, we say it officially. And I understood, and that would be your role in a bigger discussion, that we want to really be serving God the best way we can and to be exceptional on the virtues. There are 630 mitzvot. I'm sure if we could keep all the mitzvot, we would be exceptionally better than anybody. But we cannot. But I prefer to keep the ones about behavior rather than rituals. And each one is making its own. We are human. But exceptionalism, I did not see that it's like a Schwitzerei. I don't say it's like trying to make myself important. It was maybe a coincidence, I don't know, that we got the Torah, and somehow we say, okay, we have some social responsibility, and in many ways we are doing it. I mean, it's like, and I'm very proud of it. But we have to be judged by our own standards. I have to tell Mr. Assad is irrelevant to me, because I need to behave the way I know I have to behave. And now exceptionalism in the new version is saying the following. Because of the Jewish suffering and the Holocaust, the Jews in Israel are claiming to have permission to do things that other people may have done before. Like here, the First Nation was exterminated. So why not the Arabs now, 200 years later? This is a kind of, you probably hear it in a coffee house in Israel. It's not, and this exceptionalism is saying, you have to pay for our suffering. You have to pay, including the Arabs. And I'm very worried because basically, not because of my morals, yes, but also because I know Spanish. We've been to Spain a lot. Imagine if I would tell the Spanish people now, you need to support Israel right or wrong because of the Inquisition. It's not going to work. In fact, after the last survivor of the horrible Holocaust will be dead, memory will become history. And it's such a short-sighted view that we can ask for exceptionalism because we did suffer more than anybody else. No question about it. But do you think that the world is going to give us extra credit and forever for that? Only, as you said, only fanatic believers that God is with uns. I don't want to use this. It was used negatively. No way. No way. We live in a world, there are standards, there are double standards. We know a lot of wrong things are happening, but we cannot be in the wrong side of history and believe we can do 200 years later what the Mayflower people did 200 years ago. We cannot. So exceptionalism now is going the other way and saying, wake up, Israel, or Jews. You're not going to benefit from exceptionalism. One more generation is gone. It's already gone at the universities. Look at BDS, look at other things. I have a simulation in my class with the Palestinians, with a Palestinian professor, every year. And we simulate half class to be Israeli, half class Palestinian. I started to teach this class in '91 with him. Look what happened. At the beginning, we asked for volunteers to role-play Israel, volunteers to role-play Palestine. There were many Jews in the class, I should say that as well. There were a few Arabs, but the majority were no Jew, no Arab. We had enough volunteers for Israel, no problem. Now, I have to hide myself. If we have 30 students and we have to be 15, I don't even get all the Jews. I get 3 or 4. So it's an embarrassment. And that's why I'm telling you, history is history, and memory is memory. And if we have the Germans still trying to deal with the issue of memory, may go for one more generation, Angela Merkel, and another one, even the Germans, like the Spaniards about the Inquisition. So I think that this idea of exceptionalism, which was to be chosen people, not necessarily to suffer more, but to were willing to give more, and now it's like the other way around. We can do whatever we want. Very, very short-sighted. Yeah.
The people of Shalom Achshav still exist, right? There
Yeah.
are still people who are for peace. And the people who were with Ehud Barak for Oslo Accords and all that. So there is these people in Israel. Why don't we hear from them?
Oh. Well,
They have a lot to say.
I mean, first of all, I don't want to dramatize, but the government, this government we have 120 congressmen, 120 Knesset members. This government has 61, and the opposition is 59. So it's not that the other side does not exist. Shalom Akshav, or Peace Now, is mostly from the Labour Party, from a little group called Meretz, to the left of the Labour Party. They are there. And of course, I get a lot of mailings. If you just, there is an office of Peace Now in Washington, D.C., Ori Nir is the director, they exist. And J Street exists, as much as AIPAC. J Street is very close to what I'm saying, you know? And exists at the universities as well. I don't know about OSU, but in other universities. So I'm saying is just, I don't want to say the situation is so bad. 59 to 61 is still something, and by the way, the coalition includes people that they don't think the way I'm telling you. They just, you know, why not? I can be government, I can be a minister, etc., etc. And some people really want to change the economy. It's not only that I'm talking. Jewish state has very good things when it comes to many aspects. I'm now talking about the morality aspect, about human rights and equal rights. I don't even want to talk about socio-economic rights, which is something that I wish also you would take in the Torah. All these ideas about tzedek and tzedakah, you know, the word justice, so close to the word charity. There are so many things in Judaism that are enlightening the way to social justice. And by the way, there is a book of a rabbi called Sepperstein, whom I know in Washington, on social justice that I love. So look for Google Peace Now. If you're worried, they are there. They are there.
Yes, sorry.
Has the Masorti, the conservative arm of the Jewish religion, made many inroads as far as getting enough people to be a viable party?
Now I have to confess my ignorance. I had a quote of one of yours, Eshel. But was he a conservative or reform? Joshua Eshel, Rabbi Eshel.
Conservative.
Well, okay.
Oh, did you say Hashem? Yeah.
Hold on, no. Abraham Joshua Eshel.
Yeah, he was conservative about it.
So that's conservative.
Right.
Look what he say. I love it. I mean, in a free society, some are guilty, but all are responsible. I love this quote, and that's what I'm trying to say. The conservative movement in Israel and the reform movement is small because they are not allowed to be as free as a democracy should do, or I'll put it the other way around. They are not given funds and help. I'll give you an example where conservatism and reform, I generalize now, maybe it's a stereotype, in Israel are on the good side of history. They understand that we are not a theocratic state, we are a democratic state. And if God told us something immoral, we don't have to do it, which I don't believe it could be. But, you know, if you say an eye for an eye, sounds terrible. But I've got, actually from an Orthodox rabbi, a wonderful explanation that is not what you think or I thought. He basically tells the king, look, you beware, because if you take my eye, I'm a pauper, but I can take your eye. Or he tells, basically, before we start fighting, remember, if things go bad, we can both lose an eye. These are the biblical interpretations that I like. I mean, they're making others saying, yeah, you know, an eye for an eye and so on. So the reform and the conservatives in Israel, I think, from what I know from them, they are really a force for progress and clarity. I'm generalizing from what I know. The problem is the opposite. What if I tell you, in the US, 50 municipal rabbis made a petition led by the rabbi of Safed, the Tzfat, the city of the Kabbalists, you would think. The rabbi of Tzfat, municipal rabbi, my tax money, 50 rabbis saying, do not rent apartments to Arabs. Put it in the US. Think about it in the US. 50 municipal rabbis. They're all Orthodox. There's no one conservative. There's no one reform. And they're not all the Orthodox, only 50, but 50. It's a serious number of people, let alone I'm paying their salary. So we are on this, we are not at the abyss yet, but we're pretty close to a situation where this kind of thinking is going to be prevailing. As I said, the government now is more extreme than the population.
Well, they seem to have a friend in Netanyahu. And during the last election, from afar,
Yeah.
I mean, he said he was not for a two-state solution and would never happen under his watch. So it was something that would be forestalled. And it seems as though the government wants to be an occupier, and they have the vision of having Judea and Samaria somehow. And wasn't Begin also of this? Didn't he really want Judea and Samaria, and that this has kind of been around for a while?
Okay, I mean, I am pretty familiar with the Begin, so for one thing I was elected to be president of the Israeli Students by the granddaughter of Zev Jabotinsky, Karli Jabotinsky. So somehow I was against Labour Party that was corrupt at that time, at the student life, and I was supported by others, including the people from Begin. So no, the point Begin, by the way, was a victim of human rights violations by the British. So I have a wonderful anecdote. When I was in B'Tselem, the human rights organization, Carter came to Israel, Palestine, to give an award, human rights award called the Carter Merrill Award. And he gave it to a human rights organization in Israel, B'Tselem, and a Palestinian human rights organization called El Haq, which means the law in Arabic. And we were to spend 2 hours with Jimmy Carter, and I was to prepare the case against administrative detention, which is detention without trial, imprisonment without trial for up to 5 years. It has to be renewed every 6 months, automatically, if you by a judge, but you can keep up to 5 years, like Guantanamo, if you want, put it in American terms. But in Israel, So I prepared the position of human rights for anybody who is taken to prison after 48 hours or so has to be indicted, and then there will be a trial and so on. Well, that's what I know, everybody knows. By the way, now, I think I have the figure in my notes, we have 600, and many of them minors, detained without trial. At 600, it's a large number. So anyway, when Carter came, I had the figures from the B'Tselem, the NGO, and they were 45. Not a lot, really. So I prepare my little speech, and then I come to the figure, and Jimmy Carter tells me, why 45? I have my figures. I said, your figures? Yeah, they're only 33. He's correcting me. I said, the figures are, perhaps more reliable than mine. I say, yes, they are reliable because I spoke to Prime Minister Begin, and he promised me that no one, he told me I was an administrative detainee in somewhere in Africa, in Kenya, was it? The British took him there with some people of the Irgun, and I was detained without trial. So I will be the first to not accept that people can be detained without trial. He was a lawyer, Begin. So Begin was a different kind of person when it comes to human rights. In fact, even his son, who is for annexing the territories, Benny Begin, is also very respectful of human rights. It's kind of a contradiction, but they believe in something magic that eventually we can keep the territories, and then they are very secular, by the way, secular family. Especially Jabotinsky, very secular. The son of Jabotinsky, when he spent time in our house in London, we knew him well. He died from a heart attack, and he refused to have the Hebra Kadisha, I don't know how to call them, and then he was not going to be buried in Har Herzl, like all the heroes. And the Druze in the Memorial Day say, Jabotinsky, please, let go. You should be buried with the heroes, and let go. And he was buried and there was a religious ceremony. So what we have now with Netanyahu is not even the quality and the modesty. Begin, by the way, his wife, Sarah Netanyahu, was now punished to pay 180,000 shekels to one of the workers in the prime minister's house,
Netanyahu's.
Netanyahu's wife. So Netanyahu, I mean, I don't want to personalize. We are really, there are lots of, there's a lot of corruption now in Israel. It has to do with sexual corruption, it has to do with money corruption, and it has to do with political corruption, and occupation corrupts. I can tell you deals that were done with some corrupt Palestinian officers with Israeli Secret Service. I mean, this system is not a democracy. It's making everything, you know, under the table and so on. So Begin was very different than Netanyahu. Netanyahu is the kind of person that, he, by the way, he says he's for a two-state solution. He says, I know, and you know. But in reality, is he not saying to the US government that he's for, he said it in the Congress that he's for. Well, of course, he's not doing anything to keep it, because he's building around more settlements, obviously. And you see, the most foolish thing is that we think that we can trick the entire world. I mean, that's the amazing thing. Like everybody knows we are naked, except the king. Your wife first, ladies first. Yeah.
So, I sat here and I heard everything you said, and I have a lot of problems with what you have said.
Yeah.
You know, I believe that there are plenty of things that you have not said about things that are going on in Israel. But the one thing that caused me to talk right now is you mentioning B'Tselem, mentioning corruption. Please talk about what happened recently when B'Tselem was, people in B'Tselem, which you are, I'm not sure if you're one of the founding persons.
Yeah.
Recently, it has been shown that there are some B'Tselem people who are working, preventing Palestinians who wants to sell their land to Israelis, preventing them, and not just preventing them from doing so, they're passing on their names to the Palestinian Authority that later on basically tortures them, kills them, or whatever, you know, else is going on there. So please talk about that. That's one thing. The other thing that I would like you to comment on is you mentioned that, I think you said, you know, there's a lot of things that were said, obviously, that, if I understood you correctly, is that in relation to the actions of Israel, how that it affects the Jews in the diaspora, you were saying that when Israel is not, I'm not sure if it was in relation to war or to occupation, there's no bad things that happen to Jews, like, you know, you were talking that's happening lately, which is quite inaccurate. All through in Europe, there were always events going on that maybe did not come all the way to America, but there have been events where Jewish people, Jewish establishment have been targeted regardless of, you know, what was going on in Israel. So can you comment on that too?
Yeah, let me start with the second one, because the first one is so easy for me to say, this person doesn't work in B'Tselem. You are
Who
wrong.
was working for Tselem?
No. But it's a matter of,
Rumors,
there was no rumor, it was, I tell you exactly. There is a radical NGO called Tayush. Listen to me. There's a radical NGO called Tayush, extremely pro-Palestinian. He's a member of Tayush in Hebron, and he took upon himself to do exactly what you correctly say. But it's not B'Tselem. I'm so sorry to disappoint you. It's not.
You're not.
Now you have to tell the community next time when you see them who was right and who was wrong. I'm definitely, I don't think that, you know, you probably confuse all the human rights organizations. There are about 20 or 30 in Israel. Tayush is a pro-Palestinian end of occupation organization. There is another one called Yesh Gvul that is calling people not to serve in the army. Yeah, as you probably know. B'Tselem is not saying that. So if you put everything on B'Tselem, B'Tselem is only criticizing human rights violations including of the Palestinian Authority, including when there is a case of execution by the Palestinian Authority, especially Hamas in Gaza. They have done a lot of executions. B'Tselem is mentioning that too, but that's not, sorry, I don't want to go into that because it will be like my word and your word. I hope you trust my judgment because I will not lie to you. I will not lie to you. So there are different people. You think that we're talking about an homogeneous group of people that is worried about occupation. I really see myself as a centrist, mainstream Israeli, and I wouldn't do what you just mentioned. And all I know about B'Tselem, as a founder, as a board member, as a chair, is I've never done such a thing. I've never done such a thing. On the other question of Israel diaspora, well, you know, this is the idea that there's been always anti-Semitism, and there always will be anti-Semitism, and Israel has nothing to do with it, is taking it to an extreme. I can say they are racist against blacks, they are racist against Jews, and they have been racist against other groups of people, against Japanese in World War II. I mean, they were put in camps, etc. And that is a constant. Unfortunately, we have to struggle against them, no matter what color, including us as part of a minority. But the other thing is to say that Israel has zero to do with the new left type of anti-Semitism that I myself can tell you. New left, you know, in Europe. I mean, I was doing my PhD at the Sorbonne at that time, so I'm very familiar. Or if you tell me that Israel has nothing to do with the assassinations in Argentina, when the Hezbollah was key to the killing at the Israeli embassy and then in the Jewish community, when Israel liquidated, to put it this way, the number 2 of Hezbollah in Lebanon. I'm not even saying it was not to be done. I don't want to be misunderstood. Look, I go a lot to Latin America. I have a project about Arabs and Jews in Latin America working together. My concern is what we call long-distance nationalism, like Edelson paying for a newspaper to be free in Israel and ruining another paper, Ma'ariv, that is no longer a daily paper, and that's an American Jew, Edelson, that also helped the Republican Party, and so on. I'm worried about that, I wish diaspora will encourage us coexistence with the Arabs, and the opposite. Well, this particular thing you are mentioning has to do with my concern that Israel could be a positive factor for the diaspora or a negative factor, but to believe that we have no impact in France, zero impact in France, what happened now. Look, in Argentina, for instance, or in Uruguay, they confuse the term Israeli with Israelita. Israelita is Jewish. Israeli is Israeli. And if you want to know why Israelita is Jewish, because the American Jewish committee in the early 40s went through Latin America and told them it's not good to use the term Judío, Jewish, because in the Spanish dictionary, the word Judío is at that time true, was defined as greedy, all kinds of things. It was in the Spanish dictionary. So without knowing that there will be a state of Israel, listen to that. They didn't know. I'm talking about the early 40s. They say, you better say Israelita. So the Jewish community in Argentina is called, in Buenos Aires, AMIA, Asociación Mutual Israelita Argentina.
Yet
They
to
go in.
confuse that every action that happens against Jews in the diaspora is because Israel, and especially
Did I say
because-
so?
Excuse me, now it's my turn. Because
No,
of
it's
the
not
left,
finished.
because of the left, because of
Ask
the
a
right,
question.
because of the right-wing Israeli government at this point is also a falsity, because things happen and it happens
What
and.
is, I'm a bit sorry because I was trying to say it happened before the state of Israel, it happened during and it after. But I dispute with you the fact that what Israel is doing is irrelevant to the Jews in the diaspora. I dispute this fact. I don't say what you just said, that every suffering of the Jew now is tattooed with Israel. Not at all. Anti-Semitism is there without Israel and with Israel, and it has to do with racism. But I'm now telling you, to have a government that is liked by the world, like the Social Democrats that are members, just to give an example, the Labour Party is a member of the International Socialists. They have about 80 or 90 brother or sister parties around the world. They gave the possibility of a nuclear reactor in Israel. Guy Mollet in France with Shimon Peres. So there was loyalty. Netanyahu has no international loyalty. It does not belong to any international. That's what I'm trying to say. Anything that Israel is doing alone now. Not even with the US so much, not with France. The France initiative to the UN that is coming now is presented by a Jew called Laurent Fabius. The foreign minister is Jewish, and he wants the real two-state solution. So we seem to go to the extreme. I say everything in the diaspora is because of Israel. I hope I was not misunderstood. But I say it has an impact. And in fact, we wanted Israel to have an impact on world Jewry. We say, we really wanted to be an example in many ways, surely for the Jews. I mean, I would like to, when I go to the diaspora, I feel connected. I want to encourage them to be good Jews in my point of view. Anyway, I'm sorry if
I would
we
like
disagree.
Israel to have the moral high ground.
Why don't, I suggest we'll do one more, and then I want to take us on.
I don't know. Last but not least.
So I love your syllogism. I love the way, and if we go forward with a similar syllogism, in order to re-equate human rights with Israel, you didn't say explicitly, you said explicitly there has to be a settlement, and assuming a settlement involves a two-state solution, which involves withdrawing from territory. And I'm with you all the way, and then I anguish, because as you rightly said, when Israel made peace with Jordan, no soldiers have been killed. When Israel made peace with Egypt, no soldiers have been killed. But every place that Israel's withdrawn from territory, some non-governmental body has taken enough control that they've been able to launch attacks on Israel. And so you have Al-Qaeda, you have on one border, you have ISIS on another border, you have Hezbollah on another border, you have Hamas on another border. So in order to be able to do what you say safely, I assume you need a government that can control its territory. And my question is, do you really see that happening in the West Bank?
Okay. I just want to only disagree about Egypt, because with Egypt there was even an Islamic government for a while, and we kept the diplomatic relations.
Al-Qaeda's in
Instead, we gave
Sinai.
back the whole of Sinai to Egypt.
Hold on.
And even with Jordan, there was exchange of territory for the peace.
Okay, thank you for answering.
I love the spouses exchange.
You four want to get back to dinner?
The Egyptians have more of a problem with Al-Qaeda than we Israel. I mean, that's to put it in the Egyptian border, I mean to say.
No, all I'm saying is
Right.
Egypt can't control the Sinai enough to keep Al-Qaeda out from occasionally attacking Israel.
Right, but I mean, I'm very happy to say that we have very few casualties in our border with Egypt, and we have very few casualties in our border with Jordan. So put it in proportion. Apparently, Arab states, if they are states, can control. Now the question is, if Palestinians are a state, can they control, like Egypt or Jordan? Because I have my doubts, and I also have my doubts because they don't. You see, we made peace with Egypt. We didn't demand from Egypt to recognize Israel as a Jewish state. We said, recognize Israel as a state. We made peace with Jordan, and we didn't demand the Jewish state to recognize Israel as a state. With the Palestinians, we are demanding they should recognize Israel as a Jewish state. They don't want to. They don't want to. Now, maybe at the end of the peace process, so I'm thinking, why is so bad to say Israel a Jewish state? I would like Netanyahu to say why, if there is a Palestinian Arab state, member of the Arab League, why shouldn't it be a Jewish? Fortunately, Netanyahu is not saying that. It would be helpful if we would say there is an Arab Palestinian state, there is a Jewish Israel state. So it's only demanding, but without giving the other half. But I'm suspicious that the Palestinians are under duress recognizing Israel because we are strong, only because we are strong, not because we have the right as a Jewish state to live there. So I'm worried. So I'm going to ask the Palestinians what I did not ask the Egyptians or the Jordanians. No one gun, no one artillery, no one tank, no army, only police force. And you know what? On top of that, I want to have my army for 50 years in the border between Jordan and Palestine, so that even if you don't do anything, people from Al-Qaeda will not come, and I want to be there. And you know why? Because you don't recognize Israel as a Jewish state. You only recognize me because I'm strong. I can live with it. I did not ask Egypt to recognize me as a Jewish state. So Palestine, you want to live in peace without telling me the Jews have the moral right to dispossess me. That's basically the real problem there. So I don't push you, but I don't want the Palestinians to have an army, and I want to be there. And that's possible. 200 cases of terror have been now prevented by the Palestinian preventive security. 200. If there is a lobby for the two states with, to strengthen the Palestinian Authority, is our Shin Bet, our FBI. It's very clear. Now we have agreed 30,000 Palestinians to come to work in Israel this week. This is a lobby of the security forces that is telling, it's not me, they won't listen, I'm very happy, but it's not me. The security forces telling the government, you cannot keep it like that. There must be a way out. So I'm very concerned with security, and I think the Palestinians don't love us. They don't love us. They respect us in a way. Even they admire us. They would like to be democratic, many as we are, and that would be great because democracies, remember, do not fight with each other. That would be great. That would, from all the Arab world, it would be a paradox that the only two democratic states will be Israel and Palestine. So I am very concerned with security. And the idea that you cannot be for peace and security, the largest NGO of the retired military is a peace NGO called the Shalom Ubitachon, Peace and Security Council. They are retired diplomats, retired military officers, high-ranking officers, and retired police officers. And this is a very important NGO. So I am totally for security. I mean, I'm for peace, but I don't see why to be naive when it comes to security. Okay, I'm sorry for that.